All right, good morning, everyone. We're going over Lab 5 today, water resources. Like that ties into your water use chart that you've been filling in for this past week. More specifically, we're also going over personal water use, making some charts, and looking at data representation over Excel. So the outline for today is that we're going to first go over water resources. What does that look like in terms of the world that we live in, the water that we have access to? And then moving on into water usage. What is the difference between direct and indirect water usage? And how can we get our total water usage? Then our next section, we're going over data representation. So how can we look at different types of data and how can they be represented? So specifically, we're looking at pie charts and histograms. How can we make them? What are the pros and cons between those different charts? And then moving on to using the data that you've been collecting for this past week, we're entering data into a Google spreadsheet. I'll go over more specifically how you can do that later, but you're really only going to touch the yellow cells on your own personal tab with your name on it. The front page isn't really, it has all the formulas that links to your own personal page, but we really shouldn't mess with the front page or else it's going to mess with everyone else's tabs. But then after we turn in and put in all of our data, we're going to download it as an Excel file and then start making our graphs and charts. So we're making 2 pie charts and a histogram, and finally complete Lab 5 report. So the Lab 5 report is a Canvas quiz format. So under your quizzes, there's a Lab 5 quiz that you can take where you're looking at the charts that we are making today and answering some questions and doing very light calculations, nothing more than adding, subtracting, and then like simple multiplying and dividing. So the deliverables for today, at the end of this, you're going to have an Excel sheet with graphs and charts. So 2 pie charts, one for your class water use, looking at the average student in section 17, their water use, and then one for your own individual water use. So 2 pie charts and 1 histogram on the class water distribution. So we'll be making those later on in lab today. And then at the end, you're going to complete the Lab 5 report. There's no time limit on this quiz. You have unlimited attempts and it's all short response questions, or you're just turning in for several questions your Excel graph a couple of times. And then, yeah, just make sure at the end of it, because there's unlimited attempts and no time limit, that you just submit your quiz. And you are going to be using and uploading your graphs made in this quiz. As a note, there's no labs next week because it's spring break. Time passes by really fast in the spring semester. So we'll meet in 2 weeks in the week of March 22nd. So first, if we're going over water resources, if we're thinking about the water that's available to us and on Earth, 97.5% of it is salt water. So in our oceans, this is saline water that we can't consume, because salt water is really not good for you. It's actually, if we think about it in terms of groundwater and contaminants, if you put salt in groundwater, it's a contaminant, and yeah, it's not good for consumption. And to take salt out of salt water is a very energy intensive, very very costly, expensive process. So only 2.5% of the Earth's water is fresh, and that's like fresh water is what we can consume. But only 1% of fresh water is easily accessible to us. Around 20% of it is in groundwater, which we can pump out, but it's a process to pump it out of the ground to be available to us. And then 79% of it is stored in ice caps and glaciers. So that's until they start melting, we can't really access that. So within that 1%, most fresh water is either in ice or underground. And then 1% that is easily accessible to us are in 52% are in lakes, and 38% is in water in soil. And extracting that is different processes for both, for all of those different types. There are several threats to our water resources though, and 3 of them. Some of them could be droughts. So as climate change is happening and as our weather events are getting more frequent and extreme, one of those hazards that are getting more extreme are droughts. So if we look at this bottom picture on the left, this is Lake Orville, California in 2016. And this is at the peak of the California droughts. And you can see that it's combined with a lot of different factors, but droughts have a big impact on the water that's available to us. Another threat to water resources is aquifer depletion and overconsumption. So all of these in combination can, there's a lot of different factors that threaten the water that's available to us. But if we also look at this picture on the right, this is an aerial view of a sinkhole due to an aquifer collapse in Florida in 1981. So when we are trying to get some of the water that's the fresh water that's available to us, like we talked about, is groundwater, so water underground. One way to get that is by pumping it out. And if we pump too much, and if there's a lot of people that, or if our consumption of water is like growing and increasing over time, then we're pumping up water at a rate that it's not, our water table can't resupply at a sustainable rate. So aquifer collapse and this sinking, this sinkholes happen. So if we're thinking about where do we get our water from, and more specifically for San Francisco, we get it from our Hedgehog water system. It's different for different areas that you live in, but specifically for San Francisco, our water system spans from all of these pipes that lead to our Hedgehog Reservoir and also links to other reservoirs in the area. But our Hedgehog Reservoir is in the Yosemite National Park. And all along the way, it supplies around 800,000 people and up. So a little bit under 1 million people. And along with supplying water, it also, as water travels down this water system, it's funneled through some turbines, spins some turbines, and also generates electricity. So specifically for San Francisco, we get our water in the Hedgehog regional water system. So a little bit of background on Hedgehog, the Hedgehog Reservoir. The figure on the left is before the dams were put in place for this reservoir. And then on the right, it's after the dam was put in. So in 1923. This reservoir provides nearly 238 million gallons of water to cities in and around the San Francisco Bay Area each day. And it's actually a conservation issue. Every couple of years, there's a group of conservation like issues where, or like protests that kind of they argue that the Hedgehog Reservoir we should take out their dams, because even looking at these two pictures right at the start of when the dams were put in place, we can see that there's a change in the ecosystem where before there was like a small stream flowing through, but it wasn't, the amount of water doesn't compare to the amount of water after the dams were put in place. And that changes the ecosystem and the different organisms that live in the area. But because Hedgehog, the amount of water that it provides to all of these communities along the water system, unless we have just as reliable and secure like reservoir that provides the same amount of water, like this 238 million gallons of water every day, it's not really possible to immediately go away and undam the Hedgehog because we need this reservoir for this area. But that's a little bit of background of the Hedgehog Reservoir. So now moving on to water use, and more specifically looking at our own water use. So our direct water use is the amount of water used by individuals at home for activities such as cooking, cleaning, or personal hygiene. So for this past 7 days, this past week, for the water use chart, this is your direct water use, that total that you got at the end. So as some background, the average San Francisco resident's direct use is 41.32 gallons per day. And this is numbers from 2016. But the average American direct use is 69.3 gallons per day. Again, numbers from 2016. So that's for comparison, but we also have indirect water usage, where the amount of water used in the production of goods and services which are consumed by individuals. So this is for all of the products that we use throughout the day, or services that we use that we don't really think about, that we don't directly see ourselves using. So as an example, it takes around 3,190 gallons of water to produce your smartphone. And we know jeans take up a lot of water just by growing cotton and the process in making and producing a pair of jeans. So it's to produce one pair of jeans, it takes around 2,100 gallons of water. And for electricity, 1 kilowatt of electricity, it takes around 35 gallons to produce that. But also depending on the type of energy that you use, coal versus solar versus wind, and the amount of materials needed to get energy or to mine and create the materials for, say, solar panels versus wind turbines versus when you mine for coal, that changes the amount of water used for each of those processes. But generally, to produce 1 kilowatt of energy, it's around 35 gallons of water. And if we wanted to get our total water usage, it's a combination of both our direct and indirect water usage. So if we wanted to estimate our indirect water usage for us as Americans, we would just multiply our direct water usage. So this number, that total number that you've got at the end of your water use chart, you would multiply that by 17 to get around an estimate of the indirect water usage that goes into your lifestyle. And then you would add them together to get your total water usage. So now moving on at how we can look at different data sets and values. One way we can do that is by using and making pie charts. So there are some pros and cons to pie charts. A pro is that it's excellent for comparing data within a single data set. So if we're looking at this lower left monthly budget of college students, this pie chart, it gives us this categorical breakdown of data through our legend. So we see that it's color coded, so it's visually intuitive. So we have rent, utilities, car, groceries, entertainment, and savings. And using this color coded legend, we can visually just see and connect which categories relate to which ones, and then get a good idea of what is the monthly budget for a college student. But some cons is that it's poor at comparing data sets to one another. So it needs to, for pie charts, we would need numerical values for our data sets to be comparable, but it's limited. The amount of detail that we can look at within a pie chart is very limited, but it's visually just easy for a person to look at it and understand what we're seeing. So another type of chart that we can use to look at a data set are histograms. So a histogram is, we have different bins or different ranges in each of these bins that we put all of our numerical values into. So say as an example, we're looking at the distribution of patients by age. We have all of these patients, their different ages. We can sort them looking at the highest value versus the lowest value and make bins or our ranges. So our different ranges or the amounts of bins that we put in is 0 to 9, 10 to 19, 20 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 to 49. So we have around 5 bins here. Good rule of thumb is that usually for histograms, you should have around 5 to 8 bins. There's a specific way that you can do some calculations to find out how many bins that you need, but for the purposes of this lab, you would just shoot for around 5 to 8 bins. And once you've decided your bins and created and just wrote out the ranges that you would want your bins in, there's a process to make your histogram that either your Excel chart or your Google Sheets can do for you. And if we're looking at this histogram at the bottom, we have age in our X, our horizontal axis, and our frequency or the amount of patients on the Y. And you can see generally this is how we can look at a lot of data values in a chart and see, are there any trends within our data set. So some pros is that we can look at frequency distribution, how often something occurs within a range. So as an example, if we have a population of 100 people, how often do we see IQ scores between 131 and 140? We can put this distribution, we can see this distribution in a histogram and then tell if there's like a range or if there are any trends. And it's also, histograms are also excellent at comparing data sets to each other. So if we wanted to look at a person A IQ score versus person B's, we can do that on a histogram. And it also works well with large compilations of data sets. So we can look at a large amount of values within a certain study, and we can also visually intuitive, we can see like this is the distribution throughout our histogram. But some cons for our histograms is that it shows the ranges of values, but not the actual data values themselves. So it gives us only to a certain amount of detail for a histogram. But these specific values are, they're not shown to us when we make our chart. And it also doesn't work well if we don't have a lot of data. So smaller compilations of data sets don't visualize as well. So having 100 data sets or having 100 values to put in our histogram, that's great. But if we have maybe only five values, and there's like, if our data set, if we don't have a lot of values, we can make a histogram, but it could show us trends that aren't actually there. So we can't really be as confident in our final trends or like what we see on our histogram if we don't have bigger, like a larger amount of data sets. So if we wanted to interpret a histogram, there are several ways. So in the top left, we have our symmetric unimodal or our normal bell curve. So this is where our range is, we have a high, our median and our mean is highest in the middle and it's lowest on both ends. We have skew left where our mean is higher than our median, our skew right where our mean is lower than our median, uniform when we see that it's pretty stable across the histogram, bimodal where we have two curves and it's actually the opposite of a normal bell curve. So this is what a bimodal curve looks like and what it is. And we also have multimodal where we have several curves within our histogram. So how can we make the histogram in Excel? So I'm going over all these steps now, but when we do make it in Excel, I'll also just be showing you where to find different functions. But if we wanted to access the histogram tool, there are several ways. So, and it also depends on your laptop too. Excel, if you've downloaded it before, or if we have different versions of it, where we can find these functions are slightly different, but they are still within the Excel app. But to get the histogram tool, you can go under File. Once you click into your Excel sheet, you can go under File at the top or Options, and then you would scroll down or Tools, or you can scroll down and then click on Excel add-ins, and then check the box that says Analysis Tool Pack, and then click OK. So one thing that I know for some students in the past, if your Excel sheet or if you can't find your Excel add-ins, your analysis tool pack, another option is to do this through Google Sheets, but I'm not as familiar and the formatting is a little bit different, but if that's the case for you, just let me know. And then you can do it that way. And how to make the histogram or how to operate the histogram tool you're first going to create your bins. So a couple slides ago, we saw that bins are just those ranges that we want within our histogram. So we would create our bins, we would type it out, and then go into our data tab when we're in Excel. Data analysis is a button all the way on the right side. We'll click on histogram, put in our input data. So what are we looking at, the data values? Select the bins, those ranges that we've already typed up. Check the box output range, where we want our chart to pop up, and then check the box labeled chart output. All of this I'm going to go over later, but if you needed to refer to this, if you wanted to open up this PowerPoint and have it side by side with you as you're doing your Excel sheet, this PowerPoint is also available on Canvas, so you can open that up too. So now we're going to put in the data that you've been recording for this past week, these past 7 days, into Google Sheets. The link is in the Canvas Lab 5 page. And you're only going to enter data into the yellow cells on your own personal tab that has your name on it. Please don't enter the front page, because those formulas in that front page, they link to your own personal tab, and they also could affect other people's tabs too. So after that, we're going to download it as an Excel file and then work in our Excel file to make our 2 graphs, our 2 pie charts, and our 1 histogram. So let me share with you where you can find this class Google Sheet. So if we go into Canvas, in the front page, if you scroll down, click into Lab 5, Water Resources. Part A is what you did before, it's your water use chart. But if we scroll down to Part B, we are the Thursday AM section 17. This link, if you click into it, it's going to take us to the Google Sheets that you'll be filling out. So if we click into this, this is our chart so far. So once it's done loading, this front page, as it's still loading, so this front page is where we can see everyone's data, and in Excel, this is the page that we're working with to make our charts. But if you go into your own personal, if you look down at the bottom, right next to combined data, so this front page with everyone's class data, we have your individual tabs with your own name on it. So say if we just clicked into anyone's page, so your own personal page is going to look like this. At the top, it says name. You'll put in your name. The days measured is 7 days, so you'll put in the number 7. And then your living situation, do you live in a dorm, apartment, studio, house, whichever one, you're just going to type that in. And then just referring to the water chart that you were filling out, you're just going to look at that and then only touch the yellow cells here and put in those numbers. Yeah, if your data isn't showing up on the main page, it's probably because you either you spelled out the days measured in 7, or it's not entered here. So just type in the number 7 for days entered. And then once you're done filling out all of these yellow cells, it should show up on the main class page. So for now, I will give, say, around 5 minutes for you all to maybe around until 9 o'clock for you to fill out your own individual section. Did anybody have any questions before you go and do that? Okay, awesome. I will check back in at 9. Okay, great. So now that we're here, there are a few people that are absent, but for now, if we're just going to want to download our Google Sheet as an Excel file. So when we're in our Google Sheets, under the File tab, right next to the Edit tab, this toolbar, you're just going to click on File. And on this drop-down list, all the way if you hover over Download, this Download tab, a list of different things that you can download or this Google Sheet as. We're just going to want to download this as a Microsoft Excel sheet. So you're gonna click on this very first option, Microsoft Excel. So it'll load, it'll download, and once we're there, we can open our Excel sheet. And let me just click into that. So now that we're here, we can just click on the columns of students that don't have data in it. So, so any of these empty columns, you'll just select the letter at the top of the column. You can right click, and on this drop-down list, you can select delete. So we'll just delete the columns with no data in it. So we'll just go along. We'll click on the columns that aren't there and just delete them, the columns that aren't filled out. And then we'll just right click and delete. And at this point, when all of the empty columns aren't in this main page anymore, your average student, this last column in yellow, this is your, this is like looking at for this section 17, Thursday AM, this is the average student's amount of water used in a day. So can I get a thumbs up when people are?
Question.
Sure, sure.
So how did you delete the whole column? Because I was able to delete the information in the column, but not the column itself.
Okay, yeah, so you would have to just select this top,
the top
letter at the top. Yeah, and that will select your whole column.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yeah, of course, no problem. Okay, great. So now that we're at this point, we are going to be making two pie charts, one looking at your individual use and one for looking at the average student in this section, their water use. The process is exactly the same. So say we're first going to be making the average student, that the pie chart for this. What we can do is select the data, the water use activity. So bathing, toilet, personal hygiene, laundry, dishes, and cleaning, drinking and cooking, and other uses. And we can let go of our cursor and then hold down the command key to select columns that aren't next to each other. So when we hold down our command key, we can now select this data in yellow all the way at the end. So from 46.05 to 1.35, and then you can lift your command key and those two sets of data are selected. So from here, when we have both of these selected, we can go at the top. At the top right next to the home page or the home tab, there's insert, and we're just gonna click on the insert tab. And near the middle where we have all these different options to make different types of charts, there's this pie chart button. And if we click on that, this very first option, we can make our 2D pie chart. And we'll just click on this. So once that pops up, say I'll just move over on this Excel sheet and I'll move this over and make the pie chart a little bit bigger. What we can do from here, there are specifically three things that you need for your pie chart. So you have your legend, so that's great. We're gonna change your chart title to something more descriptive. So
hey Maggie, could you show us how to do that one more time? I'm sorry.
Sure, yeah, no problem. Okay, so just select the water use charts or the water use activities from bathing all the way to other uses, and then hold down your command key to select columns that aren't next to each other, and then select all the way at the end, the yellow cells, these different gallons per day units. So from 46 all the way to 1.35. Then you're gonna release your command key to select these two data sets. Okay, great. And once you have your data selected, at the home tab at the top of this Excel sheet, there's this insert tab right next to it. If you just click your insert tab, it'll give you all of these options. Near the middle, where we have different types of, there's a chat, If you use a Windows machine, your command key is control. Yeah, that's true. So, right. So it's either command or control based on based on like the different machine or laptop that you use. So in the chat, if you're using Windows, your command key is the control key, and sometimes it's the shift key. So you might have to figure out for your own laptop which one it is. And yeah, so different laptops and different versions of Excel have different keys that you should use. So that's one thing. When every time you update and get a new version of Excel, sometimes the functions are placed somewhere else, but there's another chat. Mine shows up blank after I click the pie chart option. Okay, I guess, yeah, you're
Yeah, I did it twice and it still does the same thing, and I'm like doing it exactly how you showed.
okay. Can you share your screen with me?
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Okay. Here, sorry, 1 minute. Let me make sure that you can share your screen. Okay, go ahead.
Can you see it?
No. Try again. I think I gave you permission to share now. Okay, great.
Yeah. This is
Okay.
it's showing up as.
Okay. Can you delete this main pie thing? Yeah. Okay. And now, okay, so both of those are selected. Can you go under the insert tab? And then, yeah, make your pie chart. It might be that you have to either update your Office, your Excel sheet, or your Excel app.
Okay.
That might be the case. I guess let's just do this all the way at the in the beginning. So we'll just like delete this and unselect those two columns, and we'll just do it again.
Okay. I could also try on.
Oh, it's because you also selected the average daily water use all the way at the end. So that 118.92. Select bathing all the way down to other uses, Command, Shift, or Control, and then 46 to 1.35, and then go under Insert.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, no, of course. It's totally okay. It's because the yellow cell all the way at the bottom is just the total one. Okay, great. So
have one question. Can you just showing us that how you select data like both?
yeah, okay, sure. So there's also another chat. Mine is doing the same thing. Okay, so hopefully, I think just don't select that very bottom total water use chart thing. Okay, great. So let me go back into Microsoft Excel. Yeah, so I can just go for that again. So this very bottom 118.92, that's your total water use. So just don't select that very last cell. And then once you select one set of your data, you either, based on your own computer, it could be Command, Control, or Shift. So play around with those three keys. And then for mine, I'm gonna hold down Command and then select other uses all the way to bathing and then release the Command key. And then go back under, right next to the Home tab, the Insert tab. And near the middle of all of these options, we're gonna go under Pie Chart and click on our 2D pie. Okay, and then sometimes Excel formatting does things like this. Did that help you select the two different data sets that aren't next to each other? Okay, so from here, the three things that you would need on your pie chart is a descriptive title. So, and we're gonna want to put in our percentages that show us and indicate which one of these color-coded like pie slices are which categories. And then we also want our legend, which is at the bottom. So that's nice. So if we wanted to change our chart title to something more descriptive, I can just click in and say the average ENVS 100L section 17 water. Daily water use. It's a really long way to say just the average student in our section, their daily water use, but we're also gonna want to make sure that we know what units this is in. So values in units of gallons per day. So your chart title doesn't have to be exactly like this, but it should be descriptive and it should explain what are we looking at right now. So once we have our chart title, we can also add in and play around with the main pie chart and just indicate what are we looking at in this main pie chart. So if we just select this pie in the middle and right click, it's going to give us a couple of options on what we can do. So right now we can delete, reset, match style, change chart type, select data, or we can also add data labels to indicate what are each of these different color coordinated things. What are they? So if we add data labels, it'll show up as the actual values in our that we were working with. So while this is helpful in some way, for a pie chart specifically, we would want to put this in percentages so that we can say out of 100, what percent is this slice of our pie. So if we click on these numbers, our values on our pie, it'll select all of the values that we are working with, and then we'll right click to give us more options for us to work with. And on this drop-down menu, if we scroll all the way to the bottom, we can format our data labels. So once we click onto format data labels, this window on the side is going to pop up on our Excel sheet. And we can see under label options, this label contains values from cells, series name, category name. Right now it's showing values, and then leader lines, if it's far away, if the values are far away from our pie chart, it would show lines to connect which slices to which value, and then legend key. Right now, we have them in values, but since we're working with a pie chart, we want them in percentage. So we can click on percentage, we can take out values. And right now, this works for us since they're in the different since it's putting it in percentage, but we can also put in category name. So it's a little bit more clear which slice is which. And it still looks a little clustered. So at the bottom, label position, right now it's best fit. So whatever Excel thinks that this is the best part or the best place to put in our category name and all these label options, we would just want to put them all on the outside end. So that's a little bit clearer for us. And you can also, there's different options when you format your data labels. You can put in legend key in your data labels or not, but overall, this is generally what your pie chart could look like. Make sure you have your data labels, your legend, and your chart title. So this is one way that you can adjust your pie chart. So the process is exactly the same if you were going to make your own personal water use chart. So I can just go over that process again, where I'm just going to move our average class water chart on the side and say if we want to do this process all over again, because you need two charts, you're going to select your water uses, your water use activities, hold down on either Command, Control, or Shift. For my computer, it's Command, and say I'll just take raise, and I'll just select all of the data except for this very last total average daily water use, and I'll release my Command key. Go back under Insert, right next to our Home tab, there's our Insert tab. When we click into our Insert tab near the middle, we can select the pie chart button, and we'll select 2D pie to make our second pie chart. This one is for the individual pie chart. For our own individual pie chart, I'll make this a little bit bigger again. Again, we have our legend at the bottom. We have our main pie in the middle and our chart title. So our title could be whatever's names or raise daily water use and values in units of gallons per day. Something like that.
Do we have to do them for each person or just our own?
Just your own. So you're just making 2. Yeah, I'm just going over the process again to do that. There's something in the chat. Could we do this on Google? I'm having the same trouble as last time where I can't make a chart. Yes, you can totally do this on Google. The formatting is going to be on Google Sheets. It's going to be a little bit different than on Excel, but the same process for your pie charts. The pie chart function, it should be the same on Google Sheets. And to do the Excel, the histogram, to make your histogram, it might be a little bit different too. I'm not really familiar with Google Sheets, but that's an option because I think for other sections too, there's still Excel problems going on. So if Excel isn't working for you right now, it's okay for you to use Google Sheets to make your 2 pie charts and your histogram. But yeah, I guess let me just finish up the other things that you would need for, or how you would put in your data labels for your individual pie chart. So we'll just click on our main pie chart. And once that's selected, we'll right click. And on this drop-down list, we'll hover over and select add data labels. Again, that'll give us the actual values for our the different water use activities. We'll click on these values so we can adjust them and right click to get our drop-down menu again. And all the way at the bottom, we'll just want to format our data labels. So we'll select format data labels and this will show up on the end. So if this doesn't show up for you, another way to add in your data labels is if we just select our pie chart and under chart design at the top, home, insert, drawing tab, all the way at the end, there's chart design tab. When you click into it, there's add chart element. And this is another way for you, if you hover over data labels, this is another way for you to put and adjust your, where your data labels are in. So right now it's best fit. We can put that in outside end. And more specifically, if we wanted to change it to percentages again, we can just click on these values, right click, and go back to format data labels, this option all the way at the end of this drop-down list. And just change right now we have our values, we'll put in percentage and our category name and adjust where necessary if it's super clustered or if it's not, if it's like really busy in our pie chart, we can just adjust that here. But that is basically the 2 pie charts that you're going to be making. So one of them is your own individual pie chart and the other is for the average student here. So now let me share my whole window screen. One moment. Okay, great. Okay, so now we're going to add in our histogram function. We're originally, unless you've used your Excel before and you've added in these extra functions, you would probably have to add them in for the first time. So now that we're here, you're gonna click into your Excel sheet and at the top, there's like all of these different functions. So file, edit, view, insert, format tools. It's again, probably different. It's probably in different places for different computers. For my computer, if we're gonna add in the histogram function on how we can make our histogram, I'm gonna hover over tools. It could be under files or it can be under options. Files, options, or tools, one of those 3 for your computer. For mine, I'm going to hover over Tools, and on this drop-down list, all the way at the bottom, there's Excel add-ins. And when I click on that, it's going to give us these add-ins that we can select and put into our Excel sheet. So if it's not selected, select this option for Analysis Toolpack, so then you can make your histograms. And once you select Analysis Toolpack, a lot of different things, like a lot of different functions that you can do with this, like make t-tests, histograms, do other graphs like that, but then you can click OK at this. So once you're there, we can now start making our histogram. We can just take a look at the data for our class. Right now, you can say that our lowest water use is around 40, 44, and our highest total water use is around a little bit under 250. So say if we wanted to make our bins and ranges, we'll just put that on our side. Bin in gallons per day. We have our highest, our lowest is 40. So we'll just do this in increments of 50. So we'll make around 50 increments until we hit around 300. So we have 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, and 300. So this gives us around 6 bins, or 6 of those ranges in our histogram. And once we have our bins written out somewhere on our Excel sheet, we can now get started in making our histogram. So if we go under, we have our Home tab, Insert tab at the top, Draw. If we scroll all the way to the bottom, there's also this Data tab. If we select that, a lot of different functions are going to pop up, but we're going to want to go all the way to the right side, and we're going to click on this data analysis tool. That's what we were adding our analysis tool pack. This is what we put into Excel for us. So if we click on data analysis at the end here, we're going to have this window that pops up, and there's a lot of different functions that you can use with this data analysis tool pack. So you can do your F-test, we can do different rank and percentile, your T-test, but near the middle of this, of all these different options, there's this histogram function, and we're just going to click on this histogram, select that, and we're going to click OK. So at this point, we can now get started and select the data that we are using. So our input range for our histogram, since we're looking at the different, your daily water usage per person, and just comparing all of the ranges of our daily water usage of students in this class, our input range is going to be our average daily water use, this last row, but not including the yellow cell. So from 141, we'll just select and go all the way to the front. Oops, let me try that again. So you'll just select and scroll and have Excel move on for you. So that is your input range. It's this one row. I think it might have been confusing in other classes where one person selected all of these values along with like the titles for everything. It's just this one row at the bottom for your average daily water use. Now our bin range in our histogram, our bin range was what we just typed up bottom here. So if we click onto this cell, we'll select 50 to 300, this range that we typed up at the end. And that's going to be the different columns, those different ranges that we see in our histogram. We have under output options at the bottom, we can select that very first output range. Output range is wherever you want your that bin and frequency chart that's going to show up for us, wherever you want that. So as long as it's an empty blank cell, you can put that wherever you want. I'm just going to select it here, but it could also be over here, whatever it's empty and blank and we're not using that cell for anything. And then at the bottom of this, we have our output range. Now we want to make sure that it makes our chart for us. So we're going to click on chart output and check this box all the way at the bottom. Did anybody have any questions about how to do that or what ranges to select?
Can you show how to do that output range again?
Yeah, sure. So originally the output range isn't selected, but if we select output range, it's just wherever you want your chart and your bin and frequency chart to show up. So as long as it's an empty cell, wherever you want it, you're just gonna select just like a empty blank cell that you're not using. So it doesn't really matter where, but you can just select the cell off to the side. And then just make sure to click this very last button at the bottom for chart output so it makes our histogram for us. Did anybody have any other questions about how to choose your input range, bin range, or anything like that? Okay, awesome. So now we can just click OK. And it will load. And this was our bin and frequency range at that cell that I selected and our histogram that they made for us. Right now it's not. If we just make this a little bit bigger, we can see that we have our bin ranges at the bottom, our frequency as in the amount of students, and this chart title at the top. But these are the different ranges that we made. Now we can just make this a little bit clearer. One way we can do that is just change our axes titles to something more descriptive. So at the bottom, we just select that. We can make that, we can rename it to the average water usage in gallons per day. And on the side, since frequency, it makes sense, but really for the data that we're looking at, we are looking specifically at the amount of students. So we can just change this to something more descriptive and say number of students. And we can also just change our chart title to something a little bit more descriptive. Since we're looking at the distribution of Section 17 ENVS 100L students and their water use, we can say that distribution of ENVS 100L Section 17 daily water use. You can just rename it something descriptive like this, where it just explains what are we looking at and in what units too. So we have our units gallons per day. And at the end here, this frequency, we have it color coded, but we know since it's just one color for just frequency of all of this, it's not really helping our chart in any way. So we can just select and delete that. And now we have our ranges. So we can see, like before we were talking about the different ways a histogram, the different trends of how we can look at it. So we had the normal bell curve, we had skew right, skew left. So now we can see that there is this skew on the side, and generally the amount of students that use within the range of 50 to 100 gallons per day, this is our highest. So at the end, this is basically, this is your histogram that you're making along with your two. Let me just zoom out a little bit more. So when we're here, this is basically the Excel portion for today. You have your 2 pie charts, one for your individual water use, one for your average student in this section water use, and then your histogram, looking at the distribution of everyone. Did anybody have any questions about how to make or anything about the Excel charts so far?
So I came in late, so I didn't see the whole beginning of this. So if we could talk, like if you have time after class or something, or is this being recorded?
This is being recorded, but you can, anyone who has any questions, you can just stay after class and then I can go over how to, address any of your like questions and stuff. But
Awesome.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, no problem. Okay, so, but this is basically your Excel chart. If you save this, this is the Excel portion of lab. And now, if we're going to go back to our, if we're going to go back to Canvas, so we're going to go under Lab 5 resources. We did the Excel portion. If we scroll past part B, all of these links to the Google Sheets. At the bottom, we have the link to the Lab 5 slides if you wanted to refer to them. Any part of how to make your histograms or pie charts, those steps are in the slides. But at the bottom here, there's this link to click into your Canvas quiz for reporting Lab 5 data. And this is the deliverable where you're turning in your Excel sheet is through this quiz. So if we click into this Canvas quiz for reporting, let me put this in student view. And let me just click into resume quiz. So at the top, this is basically what you're answering and turning in for today. You're going over a couple of questions. At the bottom, at the first question, when it says, what is the source of water for your hometown? If you're in San Francisco, we went over that the source for San Francisco is the Hedgehog Reservoir. So you would type in Hedgehog. If you're living somewhere else, you would just do a little research to see what's your source of water? Where are you getting your water from? And you would just type that in here. Question 2, construct and state a hypothesis with regards to your expected water usage compared with the water usage of your classmate. Basically, in your water use chart, when you're filling out that 7 days worth of data, at the very bottom, when it says construct your hypothesis, that same hypothesis, you can just type it into here. So that's for question 2. It's whatever you wrote at the bottom for your hypothesis. For question 3, construct a pie chart of your personal water usage. So for a couple of questions in this quiz, it's going to ask you to turn in your pie charts, your individual, your average student pie chart, your histogram. You can just submit the same Excel sheet with all of those charts that you've made for every single one of those questions. So I would just check it once, and then you don't have to make separate like sheets for specifically just one chart, and another chart. So for question 3, you can just submit your whole Excel sheet in here. And same thing for question 4, you would just turn in, yes, somebody raised their hand.
Yeah, so if our pie chart for our own water usage is not on the combined data front page, is that okay?
Yeah.
Or do you want us to move?
Yeah. Make sure I can find it. If you made your pie chart on your own individual tab, make sure it's somewhere that I can see it when I check your Excel sheet. So yeah.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Great. So after you turn in your pie charts, this is question 4. Question 5, where you compare your direct water usage to the average classmate. That's when you're comparing your individual pie chart to your to the class pie chart and just looking at how those sections are different. What does it mean for yourself? Is any of those like different activities different for you? And then for question 6, you're comparing your own pie chart, water use, to the average US household water use, to the average American. And then just writing a couple sentences on how that's different. For question 7, again, you would just upload that same Excel sheet with those 2 pie charts in your histogram. So you just upload that whole sheet again. And for question 8, you're looking at your histogram. How is it distributed? Does it appear normal? Is it a normal bell curve? Is it skewed? Which way is it skewed? Is it left or right? And what does this mean in terms of the class water use? So talk about the trends that you're seeing within the histogram. But basically, you're talking about, mostly for this quiz, you're just talking about the graphs that you made and the water use, and upload your complete Excel sheet. And just doing, for the last couple of questions, a few like calculations. So for question 10, again, you're comparing your water use to the average San Franciscan. So you would just talk, is it lower, is it higher? What is the difference? If there is one, why is there a difference? And then, get the percentage of the students in our class that use less water for that than the average San Franciscan, so 40.60 gallons per day. Is there a student that uses less than 40 gallons per day? If there is, what's the percentage out of all of the students that we've looked at in the entire class? But that is basically it for the quiz. And you have unlimited attempts. You have unlimited amount of time to complete this quiz in one sitting. So, and you're turning in your Excel sheet in this quiz, and that's how I'm checking the charts that you've made. Now, if we go back to the PowerPoint, the deliverables for today, again, it's that Excel sheet with the graphs and charts that we made. So it's the 2 pie charts, the 1 histogram. At the end of this, you're completing lab 5 by turning in this Canvas quiz. Again, no time limit, unlimited attempts, and they're all just short response questions. And this is where you're uploading your Excel sheet. Again, as a reminder, there's no labs next week because it's spring break. So we'll meet again in 2 weeks, the week of March 22nd. Did anybody have any questions about what you have to turn in or anything like that? If you have any specific questions about the Excel portion, or maybe for last week's lab or anything, you can stay after class and I can answer more specifically those questions. But okay, great. So I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I hope you have a relaxing spring break. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.